There is a precise moment when a system realizes it is no longer receiving input. In behavioral analysis, we study feedback loops. Every organism, every psychological profile, relies on them to map their reality. But the narcissist doesn't just rely on feedback loops, they survive on them. They are a closed circuit, and you have been the electrical current keeping their internal engine hummed to life. When you leave, when you truly go cold, dead silent, and vanish from their orbit forever, something happens inside their nervous system that they are entirely unprepared for. And it is not the dramatic rage, the desperate phone calls, or the calculated hoovering you've been conditioned to expect. It is something far more clinical and far more chilling. Most people believe the narcissist's greatest fear is exposure. It isn't. Their deepest, most primal terror is non-existence. To a highly manipulative, fragile ego structure, your attention is the mirror that proves they exist. When you pull that mirror away permanently, they don't just miss you. They experience a psychological phenomenon akin to sensory deprivation. Imagine being locked in a completely dark, soundproof room. At first, your brain tries to find a signal. Then it begins to hallucinate. Finally, it begins to panic. In this speech, we are going to dissect the micro-behaviors, the hidden cognitive shifts, and the quiet, desperate recalibration that happens behind closed doors when a narcissist realizes you are gone forever. We aren't talking about the public face they wear to save narrative control. We are looking at the raw, unvarnished mechanics of their internal collapse. If you have ever wondered why they suddenly seem like an entirely different person after you leave, or why their final, quiet reaction feels so deeply unnatural, you are about to get the exact blueprint of their mind. By the time we finish today, you will not only understand what happens in their quietest hours, but you will also possess the ultimate psychological shield, the knowledge of exactly why your silence is the most powerful disruptor of their entire reality. Look at the palm of your hand. If you hold a glass of water, your brain receives constant microsignals. The weight of the glass, the cool temperature of the condensation, the tension in your muscles. Your brain knows the glass is there because of the feedback. If I suddenly vanish that glass from your hand instantly, your nervous system experiences a brief, shocking moment of lag. Your muscles stay tense for a split second, holding empty air. When you go completely, irreversibly silent, when you block, delete, move, and vanish from a narcissist's life, you are vanishing the glass. And the reaction you are going to see from them is not what the movies tell you. It is not the movie villain explosion. The real reaction is a quiet, desperate, and deeply surprising psychological scramble. When you first go silent, their initial reaction isn't anger. It is curiosity mixed with a subtle, rising chemical panic. In human behavior, we look for patterns. The narcissist has mapped your triggers. They know exactly which button to push to get a defensive text, a tearful phone call, or a long explanation. At first, they will push those buttons. They might send a casual, thinking of you text, or a highly provocative accusation designed to make you defend your character. But when those buttons click and nothing happens, the machine breaks. They realize the feedback loop is dead. Behind closed doors, their heart rate spikes. Their brain enters a state of cognitive dissonance. They are forced to confront a reality they cannot control. And for a mind built entirely on the mechanics of control, this is a psychological emergency. This is where the surprise comes in. You expect them to chase you. Instead, they will often do the exact opposite. They will freeze you out with a theatrical display of happiness. They will suddenly post more than ever. They are suddenly thriving, deeply spiritual, wildly successful, or deeply in love with someone new. It looks organic, but it is highly engineered. It is a behavioral test. It is a hook cast into the water, waiting for you to bite. They are screaming, "Look how little you mattered," in the hopes that you will scream back, "How could you?" If you don't bite, the performance falls apart. Phase 3. The threat of non-existence. Without your reaction, the narcissist faces the one thing they cannot tolerate, their own emptiness. You see, a narcissist does not have a stable internal sense of self. They are like a moon. They have no light of their own. They only reflect the light of the suns around them. You were their sun. Without your attention, even your angry, frustrated attention, they begin to feel themselves fading away. Their surprise reaction to your permanent absence is a profound, rapid deterioration of their ego. They will rapidly discard the version of themselves they were with you, rewrite the entire history of your relationship to make you the abuser, and immediately seek a replacement. It is a sterile, mechanical process. It feels deeply personal to you, but to them, it is simply refueling an empty tank. When you are gone forever, the ultimate surprise is not how much they fight to get you back. The ultimate surprise is how quickly they will eventually go completely quiet once they realize your boundary is made of concrete. They do not possess the emotional stamina to knock on a door that will never open. They will pack up their tools, take their theater props, and move to a different stage with a new audience. Your silence is not just a boundary. It is a mirror that forces them to look at their own emptiness. And that is a view they will run from every single time. Look at the way a radar array operates in an empty sky. It sends out a highly calibrated electromagnetic pulse, waiting for it to strike an object and bounce back. That return signal tells the system everything it needs to know: the target's distance, its speed, its vulnerability, and its mass. The radar system cannot function in a vacuum. It requires an object to define its own purpose and position. The narcissist's entire psychological architecture operates precisely like this radar. They do not possess an internal compass or a self-sustaining core. Instead, they ping their environment constantly, using the people around them as physical infrastructure to map their own existence. When you decide to walk away permanently, cutting off the supply, blocking the channels, dropping into absolute dead silence, you aren't just leaving a relationship. You are turning off the target. You are removing the object that the radar relies on to confirm its own reality. In behavioral analysis, we call this the onset of the phantom signal phase, and it triggers a profound sensory deprivation within the narcissist's nervous system. For months or years, their brain has been deeply conditioned to receive a specific chemical feedback loop from you. Every time they provoked you, every time you defended your integrity, every time you cried, argued, or pleaded for clarity, their system received a massive hit of psychological reassurance. To them, your emotional expenditure was proof of their absolute significance. Your pain was the evidence of their power. When that suddenly drops to zero, the brain doesn't simply adjust. It goes into an immediate, involuntary state of emergency. The neural pathways that were carved out to process your reactions are suddenly firing into empty space. At first, the narcissist experiences a strange, disorienting lag. They will send out exploratory pings, perhaps a seemingly benign text, a casual question through a mutual acquaintance, or a calculated piece of bait on social media. They are resting on the assumption that the pattern will hold, expecting the radar pulse to hit you and bounce right back to them in the form of a response. But when the boundary holds and nothing returns, the psychological vacuum begins to collapse inward. Without your energy to absorb, the narcissist is forced to sit in a totally dark, soundproof room of their own making. In clinical sensory deprivation, when the brain is cut off from external data streams like light and sound, it rapidly begins to panic and manufacture its own hallucinations just to feel stimulated. In the narcissist's mind, this deprivation manifests as an existential terror. They begin to experience a severe dysregulation of their internal stability. Because they lack a stable identity, they require your reactions to feel real. Without that mirror, they face a terrifying sensation of psychological evaporation. The quietness of your absence becomes a physical weight in their environment. They will compulsively check for signs of your life, scanning for a digital footprint, a crack in your armor, or any indication that you are still tracking them. The realization that they have become entirely irrelevant to you causes a massive spike in cortisol and adrenaline. It is a primal threat response, not born out of love or genuine grief for losing you, but out of the sudden, shocking realization that their control mechanisms have completely failed. They are left holding an empty, echoing connection, staring directly into the void of their own profound inadequacy. When the exploratory pings fail to hit the target, the narcissist immediately transitions into a highly calculated, theatrical phase of behavioral compensation. In human profiling, we understand that when a subject cannot control a situation, they will aggressively attempt to control the perception of the situation. This is where the illusion of indifference is constructed. The sudden, total silence from your end leaves a gaping wound in their ego, and to prevent anyone, including themselves, from seeing the blood, they immediately erect a massive, brightly lit stage play of absolute triumph. They don't just move on, they move on with a performative vengeance designed to broadcast an explicit message to their missing audience. Your permanent departure had zero impact on their life. Behind this sudden explosion of lifestyle upgrades, new relationships, intense social activity, or deep spiritual awakenings, lies a meticulously engineered behavioral trap. Every single piece of content they post, every story they ensure filters back to you through mutual acquaintances, and every public display of joy is a weaponized countermeasure. It is a highly strategic attempt to force an involuntary emotional reaction out of you. They are operating on a fundamental principle of behavioral psychology. If I cannot get you to engage with me through direct provocation, I will get you to engage with me through envy, hurt, or a sense of injustice. They want you to look at their curated reality and think to yourself, how can they be this happy after what they did to me? They are actively fishing for that one desperate text message where you break your silence to demand answers or express your pain. If you peel back the layers of this sudden, hyper-visible happiness, the mechanics reveal a state of severe internal franticness. A genuinely indifferent person does not spend massive amounts of psychological energy proving their indifference to an empty room. The very scale and volume of their performance is the exact measure of how deeply your silence is cutting into their nervous system. They are running a race against their own internal emptiness, using the noise of their new life to drown out the deafening quiet of your absence. They will often fast-track a new romantic partner or a major life change during this phase, treating people like stage props to populate the background of their movie. This entire display is entirely transactional and completely hollow. It relies entirely on the hope that you are watching from the wings. When you refuse to look, refuse to bite, and maintain a state of total, unshakable invisibility, the performance begins to take a massive toll on their cognitive reserve. A theater production cannot run indefinitely without a paying audience, and as the days stretch into weeks without a single response from you, the actors on their stage begin to lose their utility. The narcissist is forced to expend a continuous stream of energy to maintain a facade that is yielding absolutely no return on investment. The illusion of indifference is their ultimate defensive wall, but it is entirely dependent on your curiosity to keep it standing. When you deprive them of that curiosity, the shiny, perfect life they are projecting starts to crack under the weight of its own artificiality, transforming their engineered triumph into an exhausting monument to their own failure to move you. When the performative display of indifference fails to draw you back into the arena, the narcissist's internal system encounters a critical existential threat: toxic shame. In the hierarchy of human emotions, shame is the most destructive force to a fragile, highly defended ego structure. To prevent this shame from breaching their psychological firewall, Their mind initiates an involuntary, primitive survival protocol known in behavioral science as splitting. This is a cognitive defense mechanism characterized by the inability to hold opposing views of a person or situation. In their world, there is no gray area. Everything and everyone must be categorized into absolute binaries: purely good or purely evil, completely loyal or utterly traitorous. Because you have established an impenetrable boundary and refuse to be controlled, you can no longer be integrated into their mind as a source of positive reflection. To accept that you left because of their behavior would require them to look directly at their own profound inadequacy, a confrontation that would trigger a complete psychological collapse. To avoid this, the narcissist's brain undergoes a rapid, real-time rewriting of history. This is not merely a conscious, strategic lie they tell to their social circle. It is a profound, unconscious, cognitive restructuring. The human brain is highly malleable, and the narcissist's mind is exceptionally skilled at altering its own memory banks to preserve the false self. They systematically go back through the timeline of your relationship and edit the files. Every act of kindness you performed is retroactively coded as calculated manipulation. Every boundary you set to protect your sanity is reframed as an act of cruel control. The moments you reacted to their abuse are isolated, stripped of context, and magnified into definitive proof of your inherent instability. They construct a highly detailed, completely fabricated psychological profile of you as the ultimate villain of their story. They run this new narrative through their internal processor until they fully believe it themselves. This autosuggestion is why their conviction is so terrifyingly absolute when they speak about you. They are not acting a part. They have successfully brainwashed themselves to survive their own failure. Once the internal rewrite is complete, they deploy this narrative outwardly into their social ecosystem. This is the clinical mechanics of the smear campaign, a preemptive strike designed to secure external validation. By recruiting allies, passive observers, and mutual acquaintances to validate their victimhood, they create a social echo chamber that reinforces their newly manufactured reality. They cast themselves as the tragic, resilient survivor of your alleged malice, successfully converting the paralyzing shame of your abandonment into the highly valuable currency of social sympathy. Through this lens, your permanent departure is no longer a consequence of their toxicity, but a malicious abandonment perpetrated by an unstable, ungrateful abuser. This splitting mechanism allows them to walk away from the wreckage of the relationship with their self-delusion completely intact, shielded from the crushing weight of reality by a fortress of self-serving lies. When they are forced to interact with any remaining physical or digital traces of you, this narrative splitting acts as an automatic filter. If they see a photo of you, their brain does not register the moments of shared warmth. Instead, the cognitive filter instantly overlays the fabricated villain persona, triggering an immediate wash of synthetic anger to keep any underlying grief at bay. They must maintain this high-state cognitive distortion at all costs, because the moment they allow a single crack of genuine self-reflection to appear, the entire artificial structure of their identity risks a catastrophic, irreversible implosion under the pressure of their accumulated guilt. To observe a narcissist in the immediate aftermath of your permanent departure is to witness a highly accelerated, clinical process of target reallocation. In behavioral analysis, we understand that an organism deprived of its primary life support system must immediately secure an alternative source or face systemic failure. For the narcissist, emotional supply, attention, validation, control, and reaction is not a luxury. It is the oxygen that keeps their fragile, artificial identity inflated. The moment they realize your boundary is absolute, and that no further energy can be extracted from you, their survival instinct overrides any lingering pretense of emotional connection. They do not pause to grieve, they do not self-reflect, and they do not process the loss. Instead, they pivot with a cold, mechanical swiftness to locate and secure a new source of psychological fuel. This rapid transition is one of the most jarring and deeply surprising realizations for anyone who has ever loved a narcissist. It exposes the absolute transactability of the relationship you shared. When you are gone, you are not missed as a unique, irreplaceable human being with specific quirks, dreams, and shared memories. You are missed in the same way a driver misses a car that has run out of gas. The driver does not mourn the vehicle's personality. They simply look for another vehicle to get them to their destination. The narcissist begins scanning their social horizon with hyper-vigilant precision, looking for individuals who possess the specific vulnerabilities, empathy, or resources that can be easily exploited. This process of reallocation can target an entirely new romantic partner, a group of highly susceptible friends, or even an intensified focus on professional colleagues who can provide a temporary flood of praise and validation. In this phase, the speed at which they can idealize a new target is breathtaking. They will seamlessly copy and paste the exact same romantic scripts, the same deep declarations of soulmate-level connection, and the same intense vulnerability they once mirrored with you. To the outside observer, it looks like a miracle of rapid healing. In reality, it is a desperate, sterile copy-paste operation designed to bypass the normal, slow-building stages of human intimacy. They must establish a strong foothold in the new target's mind as quickly as possible to begin drawing the vital supply they need to quiet their rising internal panic. Every intense gaze, every grand gesture, and every late-night conversation with the new target is a calculated step to wire that person's nervous system to their own, ensuring a steady stream of feedback. This clinical reallocation provides the ultimate, undeniable proof of what the relationship truly was. It strips away the romantic illusions and reveals the hard, mathematical reality of their psychological makeup. Their connection was never about who you were, but what you provided. You were a utility, a temporary custodian of their fragile self-esteem. When you turned off the supply, you became obsolete to their operational system, forcing them to find a new outlet to plug into. This swift, unfeeling pivot is not a sign of their strength or their ability to heal quickly. It is the ultimate testament to their profound developmental arrest. They are trapped in a perpetual loop of consumption, unable to form genuine attachments, forever moving from one host to the next in a desperate, endless bid to keep the dark reality of their internal emptiness at bay. The final phase of this behavioral cycle is marked by a transition into a state of absolute, uncharacteristic silence. For weeks or months, you may have braced yourself for the next wave of manipulation, the next digital intrusion, or the next proxy attack through mutual acquaintances. We are conditioned to believe that a highly manipulative personality will endlessly loop back, that their obsession with control will drive them to knock on your door forever. But when a boundary is built out of absolute, unyielding concrete, when there is not a single leak of data, not a micro-reaction, and not a single crack in your digital or physical perimeter, the narcissist's calculation shifts. They are, at their core, efficient predators of human energy. They operate on a strict cognitive economy of effort versus return. When the cost of attempting to breach your boundary consistently yields a 0% return on investment, their system is forced to shut down the operation. This quiet acceptance is not born out of a sudden flash of maturity, respect for your wishes, or a peaceful resolution of their internal conflict. It is a sterile, calculated retreat. In behavioral profiling, we observe that once the narcissist has fully committed to the target reallocation phase and secured their new sources of validation, the old file containing your identity is effectively archived. The emotional charge they once associated with you, Even the intense synthetic anger generated during the splitting phase begins to lose its utility. They cannot afford to waste their limited cognitive and emotional resources obsessing over a closed circuit. The silent treatment they once weaponized against you as a tool of punishment now morphs into an organic, permanent silence, driven by your total irrelevance to their current survival strategy. They simply stop trying. This sudden, profound stillness from their side can feel highly unsettling to a survivor who has spent months in a state of hyper-vigilant anticipation. You expect a grand finale, a dramatic confrontation, or a final, vindictive parting shot. Instead, the screen simply goes black. The calls stop. The indirect social media baiting ceases, and their physical presence completely evaporates from your life. This silence is the ultimate, undeniable confirmation of their psychological landscape. It proves that the entire relationship was an artificial theater. The moment you stopped playing your role and refused to sit in the audience, the play was canceled, the set was struck, and the theater went completely dark. They do not hold on to sentimental attachments. They do not keep a quiet, warm corner in their heart for the history you built together. When the transactional value of the connection drops to zero, they discard the memory with the same ease as an obsolete piece of technology. Understanding this final, quiet retreat is the key to reclaiming your absolute psychological sovereignty. Their silence is the physical manifestation of their defeat. It is the proof that your boundary was impenetrable, that your silence was louder than their noise, and that you successfully starved the machine of the one thing it needed to survive: your attention. By refusing to engage in their games, you force them to pack up their illusion and carry it elsewhere. The absolute quiet that remains is not a void. It is the clean, peaceful space where you get to rebuild your life on your own terms, entirely free from the distorting gravity of their influence.